I'm Dan Murphy, and you are watching DS Alumni. Where are they now? I'm here with a DS alum, and why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Casey Potts. I am a DS alum, class of 1972, and I was fairly easy to find because since 1977, I have been teaching here at Dover-Sherburne High School the subject English, although this is my last year. So easy to find, and now you know where I am.
Yes, but so much has probably changed since 1972, so why don't we
is correct.
Talk about that?
Well, let's see. In 1972, well, we should probably go back to even my freshman year, because during my freshman year, the high school that currently exists was in the process of being built. The old middle school, which only exists now in the form of a gymnasium, all else has been destroyed from that, and it was called a junior high after after we merged from, okay, well, let's even go back further. So there used to be a high school. Then the junior highs were in each respective town. So the junior high in Sherburne was at Pine Hill. The junior high, which was grades 7 and 8, was at Carroll School in Dover. And then the two towns would meet at the high school. So my freshman year, it was decided that we would have a regional junior and senior high. So they built a new high school, but unfortunately, it was not done in time when school opened that year, the fall of 1968. So what happened was that the high school went to school 3 days a week at the old, what was the junior high, the old high school, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that meant the poor junior high students had to go to school on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So that arrangement lasted till right around Thanksgiving when the new building opened. A funny story is the way that we got the books from the library from the high school to from the old high school to the new high school was that we created a human line of students who handed the books along the line, and that's how we got the books from one school to the other, or at least that's how I remember it. So that is one big change. We won't talk about technology, the teaching staff, and other things. And then in 2003 or thereabouts, we built a new middle school. The people in the old middle school went to the new middle school. The people in the high school went to the old middle school, and then we renovated the high school. So the current high school that we are in is version 2, and that's kind of where we are. So those are some of the changes. If you ask me more specific questions, I can focus on other areas. The choice is yours.
Well, I mean, it's not just changes to the structures, but I mean, in some changes in terms of population and
population, and yes, so we can talk about the fact of, yes, the population, back when I moved to town in 1964, Dover had Sherburne. I moved to Sherburne. I love both towns equally, trust me. But it had a Grange, a highly functioning Grange, okay, which I don't even know if it exists anymore. It was very rural. It was not what it is today. It was, yes, there were lots of horses and cows, and I'm not really making that up. So the town was different. The population was different. It was, Sherburne had yet really to be discovered. And so during my time as a student here, more people moved in. The school actually, by the time I came back to teach, there were probably almost 900 students here, so we quickly suddenly had outgrown the high school, which became a little bit of a problem, although numbers eventually went down. Let's see, the teaching staff. When I came here, the teaching staff was pretty much new. They were my teachers for a long time, and then I happened to work with many of those people, almost all of whom retired as of about 10 years ago. And in fact, the only two teachers who were kind of links to that old group, Mrs. Rebecca Vizlis and I, both are retiring this year, so we kind of serve as that link from the old generation of teachers to new generation of teachers. So teaching staff has turned over, administration has turned over, so a lot of things have changed. I watched as the school somehow became, during the 1980s, a school that was highly ranked. Like, I'm not exactly sure how all of this happened. It did happen under the tenure of Richard J. Wakely, who is probably the most important person in Dover-Sherburne history. The gymnasium is named for him. For those of us who knew him and worked with him, I think we'd all say that probably one of the most important people in our lives. I know definitely true in my life. And I will say one of the cool things that I think today is that his fingerprints are still all over this school, and a lot that happens is indirectly controlled by him, though he hasn't been here for a while. So that it kind of describes some of the influence that he had on us. So during that time, sometime in the 80s, all of a sudden we became a really good school, highly ranked. They started ranking schools, and it's been a lot of fun to teach at a school during that process, and to be at a school now that is considered that good, though I never really know how much I trust those things anyway. Hard to rank schools, but it's certainly a pleasure to be part of one that is considered so successful. So that's changed. So the population has changed, the houses have changed. Many of the old, smaller houses have turned over to not so old and slightly larger houses and things like that. It's a town where now I think a lot of people come here because of the school and will be here for a while, so in some cases it can be a little transient in that way. But otherwise, a lot of what DS was then, it still is today, I'm happy to report.
Yeah, well, then I guess the flip side of that question is, what are the things that have stayed the same that you enjoy?
Well, I'd say probably the biggest thing, and it's hard to say, again, I would go back to Dick Wakely, is that he hired really good people. So he had control over that. So I think the school is blessed with a lot of really good, dedicated teachers who happen to be really good people. We get along, we work together, we're collegial in a way that, rumor has it, because I've never been anywhere else, but this isn't like that at other schools. And then obviously I think one of the best parts about working here is also the kids. You know, the kids are really great kids to work with. They're smart, they are well cared for, they are interested in what we're doing, they're courteous, they're under a little pressure, and yeah, you have that from those whom much is given, much is expected, and there's definitely, that's something that we deal with, but it's okay. It's the kind of problem that it's good to work with. So I would say the quality of person, though the people themselves have changed, the quality of people has largely remained the same. And I would say that's probably the largest factor involved in Dover-Sherburne's success. It's just if you put a lot of good people together in a place and have them working together and playing together, good things happen. That's been my experience, at least.
Okay, so why don't we get like into your background? So what attracted you to teaching and?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So I went to school I went to college. I went to UMass to play basketball. Several things happened that didn't quite go as planned. So then I became a teacher, and then I decided. I became an English major. Became a teacher at the time when we were told as English majors there are no teaching jobs. Okay. After I graduated, I applied for one job, and that was to Dover-Sherburne. And if this were a true success story, I would have gotten the job at that time and would have lived happily ever after. I have lived happily ever after, but I did not get the job at the time. In fact, a gentleman by the name of Don Cannon, who was then a junior high teacher, junior high and middle school, we'll use those terms interchangeably. He came over from the junior high at that time. A woman was hired to teach in the junior high, and I got a job as an assistant football coach, and I substitute taught. So I was in a lot. There were a couple of teachers who seemed to be out often to make sure I was in often, and by luck, it seems, an English teacher happened to leave right around Thanksgiving that year, and so I fell into my job. Then I got up, and I have stood here for 41 years. So it was some planning, some luck. When I first got the job, I was pretty young, 23. I thought I would teach till I was 30, and then apparently when I reached 30, I said, maybe I'll teach a little longer. So it's worked out pretty well. So I would like to say that I had always planned on becoming a teacher, and I have fulfilled my lifelong dream. I have fulfilled a lifelong dream, but it I hadn't always wanted to be a teacher, but now that I have done it for so long, I really couldn't have imagined doing anything else. So as the saying goes, if you want to see God laugh, plan your life. And I wouldn't have changed anything in the plan. It's worked out pretty well.
Okay. And I know in addition to teaching, you already alluded to this somewhat, you also did some coaching.
I coached, yes, I did. So I coached football for 3 years in one stint, and then a few years later they needed a coach in the building, and I coached for 4 years. When I first started coaching, I had the opportunity to coach my younger brother, who was a kicker at that time, which was a lot of fun. I coached basketball for a total of 34 years. 28 as a JV coach to Chris DeBose, and then 6 years as an assistant. I stopped being, all right, so the story goes like this. Chris DeBose was going to retire. I didn't want to be the varsity coach at that time. Not that I'm assuming I would have gotten the job, but it wasn't of interest to me because I was at a point in my life when I was probably trying to simplify things. So I decided to stop coaching JV basketball as a paid position, and that we would hire someone who hopefully we could mentor, and then that person might be able to take the job eventually, because Mr. DeBose gave a 3-year notice. And then I started being Mr. DeBose's unpaid assistant coach. So imagine me going home to my wife saying, honey, I have good news. I'm not coaching JV basketball anymore. She rejoiced because I was gone many nights. But then I said, but I am going to coach as an assistant next year and not get paid for it. And so she looked at me, as I'm sure she does every now and then, and says, oh, that's very interesting. But it ended up working out really well. The JV coach we hired was named Rick Grady. He was the current varsity coach. He was fabulous. When Mr. DeBose retired, Mr. Grady, Rick, got the job, and then I was his assistant for 6 years, and then it was time to stop doing that. And I've also coached track. I was the head coach for a while in the 90s, and then I came back and did some jump coaching, so I have done that as well. So yes, I have also been involved in sports for many of the years. Recently, I do some officiating of track, but generally I'm just focusing on the teaching.
All right.
Which is good.
Yes. Well, and then this is going to be your last year.
That is correct.
So,
yes.
What brought you to that decision?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't planned. Originally, I thought I had put some number out there, like I thought around 65. I'm 64 now. Then there were other factors, and then we had a teacher who was really good in a position, who had a part-time position for us, and it appeared that she would have to eventually lose that position. I thought it was worth trying to keep her, and so one of the ways that I figured that we would be able to keep this teacher was if I retired and she suddenly got a full-time job. Now what happened, she was shared from high school and middle school. At the same time that all this was happening, a teacher actually left from the middle school, and so this teacher happened to then get the middle school job. Okay, so then all of a sudden this person who had kind of inspired me to make this decision had a job already. But by then, I had decided that, you know what, that's maybe a good idea to retire. So though we didn't have that same kind of motivation for replacement or anything like that, that seemed to be a very comfortable decision for me. So, so again, I wish I had planned it, gone according, but much of my life is like that. I just kind of go along and things happen. Joseph Campbell has said, if you are on the right road, the doors will open for you. And so I'm really happy, actually, to be going out at this time. And I love what I do. There's no, it's not, I don't feel burnt out or anything like that. It's just, it was the same thing when I was coaching. It was just like, it's time. So it's just like I have this inner voice that just said, it's time. And so, yeah, it's been a while, but it'll be good. I will say the thing, I will miss a lot of things probably, though people say I must have mixed feelings, and I do have to say I have no mixed feelings at all. And I'm not elated to leave. I'm not counting down the days. I'm complaining because they're actually going by somewhat quickly. I wish they would slow down. But no, everything is good. It's I call the theme of my year has been extrication with a smile, because I'm entangled in a lot of different things. But it's been a lot of fun to watch, and I really feel that the school will do quite well without me. It'll be different, yes, but I've seen people who were major contributors, and the school misses them, yes, but new people come in, the school takes on a little different personality. And I always think that the best of the people who leave, and I hope there is perhaps some best that I have had been able to contribute, will stay behind. So that's what I am hoping. But just in case that isn't true, my daughter also teaches here. She's been here for 8 years, and it's been a real pleasure having the opportunity to work with her for that period of time and watch her grow as a professional. So in case the best of me, in some abstract sense, isn't here, she's here. So I'm still making sure that something will remain. So yeah, so it's made the year very interesting, and it's, when you have an ending, all of a sudden you have a story. You have a beginning, a middle, an end. There was no conflict, but there is some resolution. So it's funny how it's suddenly thinking about career more in the past tense and trying to, what has it meant? And really what it's meant is I've had a blast, and I've learned a lot about myself and my students. So, yeah.
Okay, so do you want to elaborate somewhat on working with your daughter now for these past 8 years?
Okay. Yeah, my daughter Hannah, she actually is a senior in high school. She always knew she wanted to be a teacher. My wife is a preschool teacher. One thing I'll add about my experience at Dover-Sherburne is I believe I have benefited from the Dover-Sherburne quadrifecta. And what that is I got my education here. I got a job here. My wife is one of my former students, all legit, no jail time. And then now I have employment for a child. So no one else has ever gotten more out of this school than I have. So when she was a senior, she knew she wanted to be a teacher. She's grown up in a house of teachers. So she came and did an internship actually here. And so she got to know a lot of the teachers here, and then she went off to UMass and majored in art. She's an art teacher, majored in art education, and then she came here and worked here 1 year as an aide in special education, and then got a job at teaching art, which is now a full-time job for her. So in the beginning, she lived at home with us still. Since that time, she has had a place of her own, gotten married and all of that. But it's really hard to describe working with her. She teaches at one end of the building, I'm at the other. She teaches ceramics, kids. It's so much fun watching that people really like her, and she really likes everybody. I hope that people like me. I kind of like everybody. So being able to watch her find herself and establish herself, I don't know how many parents get a chance to do something like that. And in a place like this, which has meant the world to me in so many ways, to have that happen here too is just, yeah, it's fun. So, we talk about school. I feel bad for my wife because a lot of times we'll be telling stories and it's school stories and she's kind of left out, but she's learned to tolerate all of that anyway. So it's just been really fun to watch her establish herself. I think most parents would like to see how their kids are doing, and I get a chance to do that up close and personal. And again, it's always nice because people have so many nice things to say about her. So how can, proud papa. It's a pretty good life here, yeah. So are there any particular or memories that you have from either your time as a student or God.
like teaching that you might want to talk about?
Memories, oh my Lord. There really are so many that I am not sure. Yeah, it's hard to say. I think of, there've been some incredible days here. There have been some hard days, I would say. I think of September 11th, 2001, for instance, the day the towers went down. That was a particularly heavy day here. But it's hard to say. I generally am a kind of in the moment person. I try to keep my energy here. I find the present to be the place where one can get the most done. So it's really hard, and it's funny because I have to. There are speeches that have to be given and things like this coming up soon, and I'm trying to go through my experience to put it in some kind of context like that. And it's hard to do, It's more people. It's more what I have managed to hopefully teach others. But I would say my favorite part of this job has been how much I have learned about myself and the way I look at the world. Because I think as an English teacher, we read books and we're talking about big ideas, and we want students to read and to write, and most of all to think, and to find a voice. And in trying to read books and to always in mind have the question, why should I be reading this, from the students, propelling me to find some reason to make it worth their while. It really changed the way I taught. It changed the way I looked at grading. It changed the way I looked at learning. And so to have that kind of development over time, and to really see myself change as a teacher, hopefully for the better. You never know, because teaching is a very humbling job too. One of the things I really like about it. Yeah, that opportunity just to figure out how I look at the world, how to look at the world perhaps, things that you need to think about when you think. I like to say that I don't teach kids what to think, I try to teach them how to think. And that's challenging. And I want to get kids to understand how much control they have over their lives. And I want them to understand when they have to act, and why it's important to think about big questions, and who they are, and to use their education to help them discover who they are well beyond the whole grading thing. I've become very suspicious of, and in some cases hostile to, the whole grade operation and the way it hijacks learning and fun. I have an expression that here at Dover-Sherburne at times our kids become joyless achievers, and I want them to find the joy of learning. I want to tickle their curiosity and wonder beyond what did I get on the test and when is this week going to be over. I want them, things that I think we learn to write about, things about beauty and truth. I want them to understand that those are things that are around them all the time. So it's just trying to use literature and language to help kids as they figure out who they are and what they're doing in the world and all of that stuff, and to have them recognize that it's really a lifelong process, that you just have to keep thinking, and you never know. Like, as I said, I did not think when I was a student at this school that I would ever come back here as a teacher, and yet I don't think life could have turned out any better. So yeah, so trying to give them some of that in the context of their lives. And, it's, as I always tell them, it's just high school. The things they worry about are specks of sand on the seashore of their life, though they don't always seem like that to them. Though I do tell them that every speck of sand is important on that seashore. But it's trying to keep things in perspective, trying to figure out that, yeah, for the most part, they're going to be okay. They're already okay. They, by virtue of being in a community like this, many of the problems that others face that make life difficult are not going to be problems they face. Now, this is not to suggest they're not going to have their own concerns and things. Yes, there are things that will come along, but for the most part, they're going to be okay. And one of the funny things about having been here for so long is that every once in a while, people will come back from long ago, and I mean long ago, and they'll go to the front office, and I'll get a call from a secretary, and she will say, "Mr. Potts, there's a student here to see you, but he or she does not want to tell you his or her name." Okay, so then I go down and, this is difficult. So I go down, and in some cases these people are over 50, and I remember them having hair. So sometimes the facial recognition software is not quite what it could be, but surprisingly, I managed to remember more of them than you can imagine. But to see what they've done with their lives and where they've gone, when we're here, we see them for 4 short years usually, and then they're off. It's like reading a book and having to return it to the library before you know how it ends. And so having the opportunity to see where they go and to find out what they do has been good. And another thing that's really been interesting about being here is being old, is that I've been able to teach a lot of kids of former students, which is a very unique experience. I'm happy to say that I have not had any grandchildren of former students. I'm happy to say, but that has been a lot of fun too. Just seeing people coming back and seeing their kids and all of that. And I'm always very good in terms of saying what happened in the 80s or 90s or 70s, whenever it was, stays in the appropriate decade. We do not share information about the people from times past. Okay, so that's very important. So that's been another good thing about being here. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess this is kind of somewhat elaborating what you just said, but how has your curriculum kind of evolved as things have gone on to reflect kind of your perspective, and even if you want to go back to when you were a student,
sure.
Like how has things changed and how has
that's a great question. Yeah, okay, so English is essentially reading and writing. So we choose books that hopefully will have important life messages. Over time, approaches have changed, technology has changed. As of 1993, we had the Massachusetts Education Reform Bill, which brought us MCAS, standardized testing, and things like that. But one of the cool things about being at this place is when MCAS came out, for instance, everyone was worried about the test, but by and large, our kids do really well on MCAS. So we haven't really had to change our curriculum a lot to address those particular needs of standardized tests. What we do on a daily basis generally more than fulfills that. So what we've been able to do in the English department, I think this is true in a lot of the school, but the English department lends itself more because it's easier to replace books and it's easier to recreate courses, and there are different approaches to writing and reading that do come up, is that I like the way that our curriculum over time has evolved, that teaching styles have evolved, that I think there's more attention paid to young teachers about how to teach a class. The licensing process is much more difficult than it used to be. Which is good in a way because it means the teachers that come in are well trained and well qualified, but it also can put some barriers in place for some people as well. But whatever, that's a whole nother discussion. And yeah, so I think obviously technology has changed things a lot. Reading as, like it used to be the kids, in the olden days, you'd have Monarch Notes or your Cliff Notes, okay? So if you didn't want to read the book, you could read these other supplements. Now they have Spark Notes. Now you have all these things online. Access to information is now much easier than it used to be. So now much more of what we do is, and in many cases, by the way, the kids are better at accessing the information than we are, which is good, as it should be. And my students have taught me a lot about how to use the internet and how to abuse the internet. No, they haven't really. So that aspect of it has changed. But really, the part I like is that the things that I think really make people think and that really matter to people, in the English curriculum anyway, that stuff hasn't changed as much. And we've been allowed in this school, one of the things I really like, and there are many, is the fact that we are given a lot of control over what we teach, how we teach it, and why we teach it. And so most of the curriculum we have written ourselves. We constantly are updating it. And so instead of someone saying, here's what you have to teach and you must teach it this way, everyone is encouraged. We have certain things we have to follow, but everyone is encouraged to kind of do things in their own way. So I've been allowed to kind of experiment with things about grading and other things that other people are a little less comfortable doing, which is fine. And so, but that's okay. And so we have these various approaches, and it creates good collegial dialogue among teachers. So I would say teachers, by and large, today are much more aware of their craft and the practice of their craft. I do not want to imply in any way that this meant that the teachers of yesterday, it was a different type of approach. And you have to understand, back then, school was an authority. We were the authority, and the parents were on our side. And so if there was a discipline problem in school, and if the principal or assistant principal called home or a teacher called home, there would be consequences. Now it's a little different, lots more negotiation. But that has to do a lot with the fact that, I grew up in the 50s, okay, and we had the kind of father knows best, leave it to Beaver type of patriarchal society. Whereas today it's very much different. The way we communicate with our elders, different. The way I talk to my parents, although my mom was pretty good. My mom always was someone who said, we got to talk. She was very good at that. I think today there's much more negotiation, there's more of a conversation. I think there's much more communication between parents and kids, or among parents and kids, than there was in the past. And so that is both a good thing, but can be a little problematic at times as well. So that's another way things have changed. But kids, by and large, are still kids. The things that I think I worried about in high school and cared about in high school, even though so many of the things have changed so dramatically, are still the things that kids today worry as they are in high school about, questions of identity, questions of purpose, comparing yourselves to other people and how do I measure up and all of that. It's not a whole lot of fun. Anyone who says high school, best years of your life, I hope you have good high school years, but if this is the best, I'm so sorry, we can do better. So that aspect of it is good. Kids are under much more, I think there's pressure. It's always hard to say exactly where it comes from. But for college and for this, like over time, that didn't, like SATs, it was a test, we showed up for it. We didn't know it was going to be on it. Now, I teach courses and have taught courses for years on SATs and the like. So that whole aspect of it is very much different. But by and large, I think, I'm certain that the education that kids are getting today is far superior to the education that I got. And that we got. It was different, and a lot of people think you go back to, reading this way and making, it wasn't always a lot of fun. Writing, for instance, on a word processor on a computer versus writing on paper. I can say that writing on a computer is much easier for most people. It's also much easier because papers can be downloaded, but that's a whole nother story too about technology. But no, so it's easier to get kids to write in some ways. People to complain that kids don't read anymore, but I will say kids read very differently. They're reading things online. So, that aspect of things has been the most interesting, just how computers work, kids coming to class with laptops, phones now as good as computers that we used to have in the past. Like that has changed a lot. But kids are still kids, and that's good. I like that. I like that very much.
Yeah, well, and then you had said that you like teaching kids how to think, but it's also how to communicate those ideas.
Absolutely, so. Because if people talk about what makes good writing, and it is, using the right word, absolutely, writing in complete sentences, punctuating properly, these are all wonderful things. But I think it's easy to write when you have something to say. And a lot of the writing assignments we give our students can be rather not the most exciting thing to write about sometimes. So one of the things I've tried to do is to find topics that I hope will inspire kids to think and to give them some freedom to think. One of the good things that's happened in education is that we've become aware of different standards. So we have rubrics for everything. Mention the word rubric to kids and they will want to throw a brick at you. So it can be very helpful, but at the same time, it can turn a writing into something like a recipe, where you write a paragraph and you take one thesis, two quotations, you just pick and choose, throw them together, stir, we have a paragraph. And while that is a good way, yes, some paragraphs need exactly that. Sometimes we give them a little too much structure. So having them think and not telling them exactly how to set things up, giving them, what are you trying to do? So what is going to be the best way to achieve that end? Writing for themselves because they have something to say rather than writing for me. So trying to get kids to think, because they do want to think. They are always thinking. The goal is to get them to think about the things we would like them to think about, not simply because we're telling them to do so, but because we find a way to engage them. And look, you can't do it with every kid all the time, but that's something you'd like to do. So yeah, getting them to think, seeing what they say. I've always loved being an English teacher because we have access to what kids think. I don't know how much math teachers, and I love Mr. Baruti, math department, love him, great friend. But they, you're seeing how they think about math. But when I'm asking a student to react to something, I'm seeing what that student thinks. I'm seeing what that student feels. And if I do it right and the student is comfortable with me, I'll get things that matter, and that's what you want to do. I learned, I don't know, long ago, that a lot of times when you write a paper, you're supposed to kind of think of a thesis and an outline right in the beginning, and then you just take that and add a few things, and suddenly you have a writing. And I became very suspicious of that, because most of the time when you sit down to write, you really don't know what you're thinking until you actually write. So instead of seeing writing something we do after the thinking has been done, I've tried to really, and I've learned, and I do this as a writer myself, to just write about the topic and see what's there. And because if you do that with word processing technology, you write a whole page about some topic, unpacking your mind, as it were. What do we have there? You can pick 5 or 6 sentences, 5 morsels from that page of writing, let's say, around which you can build something. And you will find out what those connections are by trying to make them. They don't just appear by thought, So when I see kids, when they're at a computer, let's say, and they're doing something like this, and I'll say, "What are you doing?" And they'll say, "I'm thinking." And I'll say, "Well, say, I'm thinking about the topic. I don't want to write about this, but and then just getting them to access what they're thinking and to let it come out, and not to worry about how it looks in the beginning, to discover first, and then once you discover something, to put it together, polish it up, all of that. So, writing to discover, a big thing that I have tried to change in the way that I teach writing and stuff like that. And that's something I just kind of figured out on my own by teaching. And so that's cool that this place has given me that flexibility to kind of try things and see things and all of that. And they kept me for a long time, so I hope it's worked. Yes.
Yeah. So do you have any plans for your retirement?
Yes, but I don't know what they are. So I will retire, that is true. So I will do something. My goal of independent wealth somehow did not come to fruition. Actually, it wasn't a big goal. So I will have to work a little bit, but I don't know what. I don't want to do this. If I wanted to keep teaching, I would keep teaching. So I might tutor, but I don't know. I will work on my house a little bit. I want to become a little handier than I am. It needs a little TLC. But I'll find something, or I hope something will find me. I'm open to almost anything. Something a little different, something part-time. I will write. I have always written. I have a journal I keep. And I write all the time. I don't write a lot to send to other people, except students and things like that, handouts and the like, and samples of writing. So I will probably write some things down about the way that I have approached teaching perhaps my last 10 years, and see if I can get maybe an essay or something like that somebody might say, this is interesting. So I will do that. And other than that, I am not sure, but I am not worried either. As I say, I'm sure something will come along or find me. And, everyone keeps saying, "What are you going to do?" And I keep saying, "I don't know. What do you got?" So I'm open. It could be almost anything. So we'll see. So it's kind of funny to be thinking about that. It's almost as if now that I am out of school, what am I going to do when I grow up? So apparently I have grown up, and it is time to think about that. Yeah. So I'm not worried. I'll be doing something, and I will like it. Yeah.
All right. So is there anything else that you would like to say, or?
Well, I would like to say thank you to the towns for giving me so much, and I have tried my best to give back a little bit, because that's what I think we have to do. So it has been a true pleasure being here. When I moved here in 1964, I had no idea that this place would have such an impact on my life, and I really couldn't be much more grateful. So I will say thank you, and I will say thank you for giving this opportunity to be with one of my former students and to talk a little bit about my life here. I truly appreciate that as well, and thank you for asking.
No, thank you so much for coming in.
A pleasure. Take care, Dan. Thanks.